distinction is important because I think it's easy to say, oh my God, I'm so depressed, which we all say all the time. But people who are really struggling with depression, it means that it's a significant low mood that's been going on for at least several weeks, usually I think a month or 6 weeks of feeling very sad, guilty, tired, no appetite, too much appetite, hopeless, sometimes suicidal. So it's for an extended period of time.
Well, I guess some of the biggest problems are, the things that are wonderful about going to college, like the freedom and the ability to kind of sleep and do whatever you want, whenever you want, pretty much. Those are the same things that kind of sometimes create stress because you're not responsible for everything. There's no one there who's checking in on you the way perhaps your parents used to, right? Who say, hey, you gotta go, you gotta get going, have you done this, have you done that? So that's gone, right, for the most part. And for some people that's very liberating. But for other people, you begin, if you're not following through well, if you're not on top of your work, if you begin to mess up your sleep cycles, you can begin to feel the pressure of all those things. And sometimes with depression comes avoidance, where you just don't want to deal with things. And before you know it, things get worse and worse and worse, and then it gets pretty bad pretty quickly. And one complicating factor for most college students is that colleges are not allowed to call home to say, hey, your son's having a hard time or your daughter's having a hard time. More often than not, there are confidentiality laws that prohibit that kind of contact. So it can be, you can have a depression that starts to unfold without anybody really noticing. And that's probably the biggest problem.
What it feels like for me is that I can see like the light has kind of gone out of their eyes in a way. And I know because oftentimes when they come back, it's like their whole face has lit up again, and there's, interest and enthusiasm and excitement for things. So it's the opposite of that. We see people who may not be taking care of themselves with their hygiene, right? So their hair is a mess, they look like they just rolled out of bed, they look like they don't care, they can't even care if they wanted to. Sometimes they look like they haven't been eating. They're saying things like, I just don't know what the point is, or I just have no interest. I used to love to sing and dance and write and create, and I just don't feel like it makes much of a difference. So it's just the spirit is kind of not there. And it's been happening for a long time, and they're cutting themselves off oftentimes from other people. So, there was another party this weekend, but I just didn't feel like going. I don't feel like hanging out with my friends anymore. I don't like them, they don't like me. Just a kind of hopelessness.
Complicating factor is that most of us go through points in our lives where we get down about things, we get sad, we get overwhelmed. A depression is different in that it's sustained. Usually we're talking about at least 2 weeks, and then it can last longer than that. It's usually feelings of hopelessness, low energy, poor concentration, and it can be different for different kids. It can be irritability for some people. It could be excessive worry for other people. And then there are kids where it's just like they're just stuck in bed and they don't understand why they're stuck in bed, and the family doesn't get it. They can be like fine, in May, and then also in June they just can't get themselves out of something. That's usually the first sign something more significant is happening.
What I see with teens is more often a situational depression, is what I would call it. So the first breakup, the first, real heartbreak, adjusting to moving away from home can really push some people into depression. I think in some ways the symptoms can be the same, but the things that may cause it are different. So I think it's a lot of the things that happen to you for the first time when you're a teen that when you're older, if they happen again, they don't hit as hard.
Right.
So like the second breakup, or even if parents are divorcing when you're in your 30s is different than when you're 18, for example. So, and when you're a teenager, we now know actually that the brain is not even completely developed until your early 20s. So the most sophisticated part of your brain kind of comes together in the late teens, early 20s, which means that it's harder to deal with really hard things because you don't have your best brain yet.
Well, I know in college it's you're meeting a lot of new people, and some people aren't that great at meeting new people. So, when you're coming to a new environment and you know nobody, sometimes it's tough for people to make new friends, and that can lead to like some pretty deep sadness that a lot of people struggle with, and sometimes transfer because of it, sometimes grades suffer because of it, and it's in a way, I guess, kind of like a depression.
Stress is the number one reason that people come to see us. Numbers 2 and 3 are depression and anxiety. So, if you're really worried about things, this is a good place to come. It can help with that as well. And I actually like to see people when they're doing okay. Because if things are going okay, it might be nice to have somebody help you figure out how to get more of that. Right? So, like, what are you doing well that's working for you? And how do you do more of that? Mm-hmm. So, people come here, they talk about their sex lives, their sexuality, their questioning, their, they like a girl, they don't know how to tell her, they like a guy, they don't know how to say it, they just got heartbroken, so it may not be depression, but it's real sadness, they can't stand their roommate and their music and their, pet iguana or whatever it is. They talk about all kinds of things that are less serious than depression, and I think get helped as well. And sometimes it's even more serious things. Bipolar disorder, we see students with, you name it. Substance use issues, eating disorders. It's all welcome.
The most important thing is to start talking to a professional, ideally, right? You can reach if you're struggling with something, the goal is to kind of start reaching out to people that you trust. If you can't talk to an adult or professional at the school, there are wellness centers at the school. If you're not quite there yet, talk to a friend, and hopefully that friend can steer you towards talking to a professional, and then that person can help decide what kind of treatment you need. For some people, it's really like a talk therapy, right? Just the idea of bouncing ideas, hope somebody can be helpful, and sometimes it's also different kinds of therapies and also medication for some kids.
Depression can, as I was saying before, can either be kind of a situational thing, something has happened, or it can be more biochemically based. So if you have somebody who says, I don't know, I feel like I've been depressed my whole life, nothing bad ever really happened to me, I'm just always kind of down, that is a sign in my mind that maybe there's something biochemically that's off with the chemicals in the brain. So it's kind of a medical condition that needs to be treated just like any other. So in those cases, we might suggest that that person consult with a psychiatrist to see if medication helps, because I've seen it do absolute wonders for people. But it's not the first choice, not the first step that we would take with somebody. By and large, we want to check in with whether or not people are eating, sleeping, and getting any exercise or dance or movement or something. So those are really key pieces to helping people get better. Asking if they're staying connected to other people. Do they have a place to talk? So, when someone's depressed, we usually try to see them every week if we can. If our schedules make that possible, and if not, we help them find somebody in our community in Boston, other therapists off campus who can help.